This is Lightbulb Moments by USC, a podcast that captures moments of brilliance across campus at the University of Southern California. I'm Jessica Peretta from University Communications, and today we're talking with Asal Habibi, Associate Professor of Psychology at USC's Brain and Creativity Institute, where she looks at how music interacts with our brains.
We expected changes in development of language and auditory processing, things that we think that would change with music. But a little bit to our surprise, some of the skills that changed were more of these planning skills and executive control and executive function skills, which I think, are the skills that I learned from music, kind of the discipline from music.
Asal is a scientist and a musician. In this episode, she discusses her work with the Los Angeles Philharmonic Youth Orchestra on a long-term study of children and how music training affects the brain. You've worked so much with other people and how music has impacted their lives. I'm wondering, how has music impacted your life, and how did you get started in it?
My motivation of coming to this work is that I grew up a musician, and I know how of a strong role and important role music played for me as a child growing up. I played piano, and I always was curious to know what are the underlying mechanism of whether playing music provides that space of emotional regulation. It also really helped me make friends and have a community and social networking. So that was a question on my mind before I started graduate school. Then when I came to USC, because I've seen some differences between adult musicians and non-musicians, that prompted me to go back and look at music training for children. That's what I've been doing since.
You're clearly passionate about your work. What is your favorite aspect to the field that you're in and to the work that you do?
I think it's such a luxury to have an employment that allows you to think. That's what I do. I come to work and I think about problems and I solve them and come up with new problems and things that are interesting to me. And I feel so privileged to be able to kind of have a job that allows me to do that. And I think that is kind of my motivation. I love interacting with students that are my graduate students, who I see them kind of grow from shy, timid students when they first start a year, and then one of my graduate students is defending her dissertation in the spring, and I can see this young, thoughtful scholar, and she has her own ways of thinking about things. So, and just walking around campus and seeing kind of that energy of like potential, and you can talk to in a class and give an undergraduate an idea, and then they just take it and they come talk to me about a startup they want to do with music intervention. Some of that. I think it's a luxury to be in academia despite some of the limitations that we all know there is, but having exchange of ideas and the privilege to think.
How did you first get the idea that music could be viewed scientifically and could be studied in this way?
I remember the time that the idea of music and the brain kind of sparked in my head. I took an undergraduate class. It was called Brain and Language, and it was understanding. I was at UC Irvine for my undergraduate work of how language is mapped in the brain. And as I was sitting in that class, I was like, oh, there must be something like that about music. Music is a system. It has grammar. It has a syntax. It has a beginning and end. So and kind of I went and just did some research and figured, oh, there are other people who are looking at this. So I think my work in that way is very interdisciplinary. I never fit completely in one box, and it's like I enjoy my time as much as at the music school as here in the neuroscience and psychology program, because I feel like I have this overlap of interests, and I think in my work I try to bring them together, but I also emphasizing, hopefully through some of my research, that music and arts is not this kind of like luxury thing on the side that we should have, is kind of part of our humanity, as important as science is.
And from what you've noticed, are there any conclusions that really stick with you?
We followed 75 children and their families for 7 years. And these are very difficult families to work with, not because they're difficult wanting to be, but they just have challenging lives. They move a lot, and they have multiple jobs. So for us to kind of create that strong community, and one of the things that stood out with me for that is that we had close to like 95% retention rate in the study over the course of 7 years. So I feel that we made something valuable to them so that they came back, because they have to take time, come here, trust us to put their child inside an MRI scanner, look at their brain images. So that was really meaningful. And for me, just kind of, maybe when we were in the weeds of it, was not so significant, but looking back at it now, I joke that it was 7 years of data collection and then 7 years of analysis, because we know so much about them. And then the findings, we went to this in this really kind of wanting to kind of having the hypothesis that whether learning music helps with language learning, or whether it helps you with pitch and rhythm processing, but really these not only seeing behavioral changes in terms of like overall well-being, but the underlying brain mechanism changes. So one of our interesting findings is engagement of the frontal lobe of the brain in these musically trained children that is higher than their peers that are age matched and control group. That when they do a task that is cognition based, they tend to engage these regions more strongly, and it's a set of like brain networks that are responsible for inhibition, stopping yourself from wanting to do something and planning something for a future. And it's fascinating to me that just through music learning you can have that neuroplastic change in the brain. And how long does it stay? We don't know. We haven't continued following them. But if we can make that difference at a pivotal time of their development, I do think that it would have consequences in a way that is very beneficial.
You talk so much about the impact of learning music on the brain. What are some examples you're seeing?
Some of the findings that related to their overall well-being, whether these are executive function skills, impulse control, delayed gratification, also emotion regulation, enhanced empathic concern for others, having compassion with others. If we can teach those through something that is fun and inherently important to our evolution, such as music. I mean, we've played music for as long as we've been around, like drum circles and bone flutes. So something intrinsic about it in our humanity. So to me, if we do invest in arts and humanities, and in the case that I'm looking at music at an early age, and use that as a way to teach these very important skills, it's a long-term investment that I think right now is being lost. And we want to have children who are good at math and good at science, but also when they're on the playground, they can have empathy towards somebody else, and they can have a way of like controlling their impulses for better success.
So you say that music changes the neuroplasticity of young brains. What are your intuitions as to how music is so powerful in the human mind?
I think so. From a research perspective, from a science perspective, there is good evidence that the rhythmic aspect of music has a way of like synchronizing us with each other, especially when we play music and have a sense of cohesiveness. We can measure kind of compassion and empathy and kind of sense of well-being when people play music together, and those are objective measures that we can show, and that seems to be having something to do with that rhythmic entrainment among us. And if you think about it, I think the social cohesion aspect of music was the strength that kept it with us through our evolution, because it doesn't really serve other purposes. It's not necessarily communicative of language or feeding us like food. That, and then I think it allows a space for emotion regulation that nothing else does. You can listen to sad music and cry, and you can use it as a mechanism of letting go, or you can use the rhythm of music and go for exercise and feel a lot better. So I think it's a complex picture. I don't think it's just one answer. It's kind of multifaceted in that way, but those are some of the questions I'm trying to answer. For me, it's the quiet time that I get to sit at the piano and just have 10 minutes by myself, or it's the magical time when I play with somebody else. And there's that, I don't know if you play music, but there's a very special moment when you're playing music with somebody else and you're not even looking at each other. And there is this very strong and I think potent connection, the humanity of it, that is very unique to me.
Speaking of the humanity of it all, do you think that your research has changed people's views on music?
So there's this movement of social prescription or social prescribing, that when you go to a physician and you're suffering from certain things, they don't only prescribe medication, the same way that now we've come to understand that your physician can prescribe exercise. They can also prescribe art-based activities. So maybe if you're an older adult and you're suffering from loneliness and you're with a psychiatrist or a social worker, they suggest a choir that you participate in, and there's like a list of choirs that people can go to and use it. Or even the availability of like music therapy in a lot of hospitals, whether from a neonatal unit to a cancer unit, that it for a cancer patient who has to go through these inpatient visits, here at Norris, we actually do have music therapists at the Keck Hospital that use the time that the patient is spending there to build a song from their narrative and play it on a guitar or on a piano with them. So that's the biggest change that I see, that is, at least in my field, is becoming more acceptable, but also is backed by research. So it's not that I just pick up my guitar and go play and we have a good time. It's systematically studied. The dose of it is some of the studies that we do is that how much of it is enough. When you have music listening for an older adult with dementia, is it 20 minutes? Is it every day? So a lot of our studies, we try to look at dose and frequency, type of music. In everybody listens to different, like I cannot prescribe a Western classical music playlist for a lot of people. They'd probably hate it. It makes them more anxious and agitated. So this understanding of individuality and our kind of each one of our stories and narrative related to music. But yeah, and I think at USC there is this growth of arts and health, so relating health outcomes to arts participation. And I hope to see more of that, because I think it's an investment very worthwhile.
And what are some other conclusions you've noticed through your research?
I think another very maybe short thing I mentioned is that we've been doing some studies with older adults on choir singing for older adults who have no music training. And we do that for 12 weeks to look at auditory perception and memory and cognition. And the first time we ran this choir, very, very kind, gentle older adults come in and they realize they have to sing because it's a choir study. But if you've never sang in your life, it's very anxiety provoking. So a lot of them were like, no, I'm not singing. This is not what I'm doing. And it really took 12 weeks for them to have a performance as a choir. And just the moment was so sweet. I mean, the science part of it is all of it. And we publish papers, and those are kind of the research aspect of it. But the humanity of by doing this, we could bring this group so close to each other that they exchanged numbers and they became friends and we created a community. And that really is what motivates me to continue doing this.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Lightbulb Moments by USC. Join us for future episodes highlighting the brilliant minds behind USC's research. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever else podcasts are found.